Alright guys, so the topic for today's video, or just like the title says, is when and what is the new covenant. So we're just going to go into looking up verses on what the new covenant is and how you know when you're under it and whether or not we're under it. So let's go into that now. Okay, let's start in Jeremiah 31 because we want to talk about the new covenant. And we just really want to ask whether or not we're under it. In order for us to figure out whether or not we're under new covenant, we need to know what that is. So starting in Jeremiah 31, starting in verse 31, we have, "Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which my covenant they break, although I was a husband unto them, saith the Lord. But this shall be the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel. After those days, saith the Lord, I will put my law in their inward parts and write it in their hearts, and will be their God, and they shall be my people." Now, obviously, that's something that you need to point out, but that's not exactly what we're focused on. But that is a really good thing to point out. The law will be put in your inward parts and written on your heart so that you'll follow it, rather than it just being on paper and you guys have to follow it and then do sacrifices because you can't follow it, and so on and so forth. Anyway, but moving on. So verse 34, "And they shall teach no more every man his neighbor, and every man his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for they shall all know me, from the least of them unto the greatest of them, saith the Lord. For I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sin no more." So that is number one key to knowing whether or not you're under new covenant. And we also need to point out the number of covenants that exist in the Bible, because it's actually not old and new. There's no such thing as old covenant, new covenant, as in one covenant and two covenants, and that's it. There were a lot. It just means old is one that's been washed away because it was broken. New means they set up a new covenant, and that has been done numerous times in the Old Testament. But that's how you know right there. Are we still teaching? Let me let you go, Elena.
Yes, we're definitely still teaching, and it's clear that not everyone knows. Not everyone knows the Lord. Not everyone knows Yah, because there's atheists, there's all kinds of false everything. Everyone is still teaching, so we're clearly not quite in the new covenant. And I know that's like a hard pill for a lot of people to swallow. But this is, let's just keep going.
Yep.
Because there's more.
Yep. And then
so want me to read it?
Yeah, if you want, go ahead. I'm gonna drink some coffee.
Thus saith the Lord, which giveth the sun for light by day, and the ordinance of the moon and of the stars for a light by night, which divideth the sea, and when the waves thereof roar, the Lord of hosts is his name. If those ordinances depart from before me, saith the Lord, then the seed of Israel also shall cease from being a nation before me forever. So, if the ordinance depart from before me, saith the Lord, then the seed of Israel also shall cease from being a nation before me forever. So, that's not happening. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, if you look at it, it says, okay, so the sun does give light. Well, unless you really want to go to a rabbit hole, but the sun I see is definitely the sun, but it gives light by day and the moon and the stars by night. But what did it also say about them being confounded in Enoch? Because during the time of the sinners, they were going to be confounded, and none of the sinners were going to be able to figure out how to go by the correct Sabbaths, the correct
You caught that verse for the other topic. I totally was gonna skip over that because of it wasn't the topic we were on right now.
Oh yeah,
I totally caught that too. I did. Yep.
But I mean, you will see that none of us are technically know for sure if we're following correctly, because we have gone wrong to these things, and that's okay. Everyone's sitting here arguing over the calendar, and this is why Elena and I tell you to stop arguing over it. We're not supposed to understand it fully, but we are supposed to do our best. So that's why we do sometimes talk about it, because there are some things that we do know. We don't have it fully figured out, but we do know some of it. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at right now. We're under the ordinances of the sinners where they can't figure it out because it's gone from our knowledge, and even though we try really hard, we can't actually properly figure it out. Not to mention, we only know a portion of the calendar, a very small portion of it, or the clock. So,
Yeah. I think you make a picture of it or a video. We need to learn how to do a graphic or something so we can show that, like how it moves. Because how we talked about it the other day.
Yep.
Was just... But anyways, the new covenant part of this passage was more about how it says that the seed of Israel won't be a nation if the ordinances are gone. So this is, saying that the law is not gone. It's just written on our hearts now. Like, that is the new covenant. And I feel like what we are seeing now is we're seeing the law being written on people's hearts.
right. It's the
There's
beginnings
gotta
of it.
Yeah, and that's like kind of what the tribulation is about. It's some people have to go through more fire to have their stone, stony go away.
I mean, we're walking through the wilderness before we cross the Jordan. There's a lot of lessons to be learned in the wildernesses. And then eventually we will get to the point where we have to get to the Jordan, we'll wash our clothes, and then we'll cross over it with the ark, and we'll make it to New Jerusalem. And when we make it New Jerusalem, we will all be following. But
yes,
there's a lot of lessons being learned right now. That's where we're at.
and that the tribulation is what brings that. So it's after all of that we are in the new covenant, after the tribulation. So,
Yep.
but yeah, that's in the next verses anyways.
Right.
I don't think we need to go any further.
No.
With it. I think it's the next one.
So, Jeremiah 33 started in 14. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will perform that good thing which I have promised unto the house of Israel and to the house of Judah. In those days and at that time will I cause the branch of righteousness to grow up unto David, and he shall execute judgment and righteousness in the land. In those days shall Judah be saved, and Jerusalem shall dwell safely, and this is the name wherewith she shall be called, the Lord our righteousness. I don't know which one that is. I'm gonna guess. I think that's all the same when they use Lord, isn't it? I really need to just use a version that does not have this. Yeah, Yehovah. It's always that. Okay. I need to switch versions. So, for thus saith Yehovah, David shall never want a man to sit upon the throne of the house of Israel. And I love that that's right there. What are we struggling with right now? Who did I vote for last election? Not a man. Okay? Neither shall the priests and Levites want a man before me to offer burnt offerings and to kindle meat offerings and to do sacrifice continually. Because we ended up having what? We switched to no longer doing the sacrifices. We went to a situation with Christ now, but and Leviticus 1 kind of explains that better too, of how we do that. Let's see. How far did you want to go in here? Oh yeah, right here. Okay, so and the word of the Lord came unto Jeremiah, saying, Thus saith, still saying it, Yehovah, if you can break my covenant of the day and my covenant of the night, and that there should not be day and night in their season, then may also my covenant be broken with David, my servant, that he should not have a son to reign upon his throne, and with the Levites, the priests, my ministers. As the host of heaven cannot be numbered, neither the sand of the sea measured, so will I multiply the seed of David, my servant, and the Levites that minister unto me. All right, so, I mean, that's just a little bit more on that there, but we do have some more verses, so let's get into those. In Hebrews 8, which these are just going to be parallels from Old Testament to New Testament. Do I want to start? Yeah, we'll start in 7. So, Hebrews 8, starting verse 7. For if that first covenant had been faultless, then should no place have been sought for the second. This is why my other video went 2 hours. Because of that verse right there that I had to find out. I had to actually explain. I don't know if I could do that quickly, but this verse is constantly used to say that the old law had fault, and that's why they had to get rid of it, and it's highly inaccurate. But this is actually going to clear itself up now that I think about it. So, for finding fault with them, he saith, Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. So, where was the fault? Is there any fault in God's work, in anything he does?
It's not his laws, it's the fact that they didn't want to do it.
Exactly.
And And I think back then they didn't see the good in it that we are starting to see now, like when they
Right.
were coming out of Egypt. I think that they seen that they had a punishment and they had rules in Egypt and it worked in Egypt, and they were getting new rules from this tyrannical god, probably because they seen all this stuff destroyed and they were scared, and that was like their reasoning for following it. And some of them were upset, they liked the way things were in Egypt. There
Yeah.
was a different type of reasoning for them following the law, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it wasn't in their heart to follow it. Now you're seeing people that are like seeing all of the reasons why you should follow it, or
Choosing it of their own free will.
because they love it,
Right.
or they
Blessed is he who did not see but still believes. They all saw with their own eyes the things that God did, but they still struggled. Those of us who are here today did not see it. And yet, what are we doing? We're waking up to the truth and realizing that we're falling in love with the law.
yeah,
Even though we
people
didn't
are-
see any miracles, and you look around today and people are like, oh, where's your God? God doesn't exist in this world today. And yet, here we are picking up law again, because it's going to be in our hearts, not because we were scared to death into following it. But going further with that, it says, not according to the covenant I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of Egypt, or the land of Egypt, because they continued not in my covenant. Okay? And I regarded them not, because of their not continuing in covenant, saith the Lord. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my laws into their mind and write them in their hearts, and I will be to them a God, and they shall be to me a people. And they shall not teach every man his neighbor, and every man his brother, saying, Know the Lord. For all shall know me from the least to the greatest. For I will be merciful to their unrighteousness, and their sins and their iniquities will I remember no more. And that he saith, the new covenant he hath made the first old, now that which decayeth and waxeth old is ready to vanish away. So we also need to remember he compared himself as a husband to her. So just like with a marriage, you don't start a new marriage without ending the old, right? So you end your old marriage, which is now the old, right? Vows and covenants. And then you come get a new faithful wife, and you don't set up new different vows because the first wife couldn't follow the first one. So don't cheat on me. Don't commit adultery. You don't take that away when you get a new wife. You just find a new wife that's actually willing to do it, and you create a new marriage, new covenant with her. So
with the same rules,
with the same vows, yeah.
You're still gonna expect, usually like God had made rules and he made them good for us. It's not like he gave us rules that are just, you can't have bacon because I don't want you to have it.
None of it is random. If you actually fully understand spiritually and scientifically why the laws are there, you would understand that every single one of those is for your good.
Yeah. So that is the thing. And then I lost it. Oh wait, that's it. All right. In Hebrews, this is New Testament, so pay close attention to the wording here. This is after Messiah. This was written after.
Yep.
And it's saying that it is ready to vanish away. Mm-hmm. Now, which decayeth and waxeth old is ready to vanish away. It's not gone yet. It's ready to go. Like, we are in like a process from when Messiah ascended, sent his Holy Spirit, all that. From this time when this was written until now, we have been in a period where the old is passing away, and we are waiting for him to return. And the rest of the stuff explained in that passage about the Davidic kingdom, we're waiting for that portion, which I believe is like the consummation of the covenant. And there's like, it's gonna be like, that's like, there's that wedding language all through, like all of scripture, and like all of this refers back to it over and over again. And even like the 144,000, it's virgins, the parables about the virgins, the wise virgins. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And then, like, if a virgin consummates a marriage, there's going to be blood. That's the time we're in. There's going to be blood. There's going to be people dying because they, don't give up their sin or they were unfaithful. And we can look back into history and biblical times. We know that they would either shun and put out those who would go into a marriage and they wouldn't bleed, right? So they would know that they weren't virgins. So those would be put out. That's equivalent to that weeping or gnashing of teeth. Or some would actually be killed. And we know how much of the church will actually, pass during the tribulation. That's that picture of that. You're gonna see the unfaithful be put out of the wedding supper, where there's the weeping and gnashing of teeth, where he says, "I do not know you." That's not saying they're going to hell, and a lot of people get that mixed up. That's not where that's at, but that's that. That is the equivalent. Like, when you understand the ancient Hebrew wedding model, and then all the customs and stuff that go with it, and all the biblical wedding language and the rules within it, that's what's going on right now. We're crossing into the new covenant. Sorry for the crap.
Well, I mean, it does say that there's no forgiveness of sin without shedding of blood. So whether that be animal or whether that be Yehoshua, there's a sprinkling that Moses did. There's the splattering that came out of Yehoshua. I mean, there's always the sprinkling of blood onto the people. And actually, Yehoshua's blood went down to the rocks below him, which some people think had the mercy seat. That's Ron Wyatt. I still have not a solid opinion on him. I can't possibly have a solid opinion on someone that's dead because can't talk to him to find out if I trust him. But no, he's found a lot of good stuff, so I can't not. But and then just repeating again in Hebrews 10, this is the covenant that I will make with them after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my laws into their hearts, and in their minds will I write them. So again, we have in Hebrews 10. So in the New Testament, he's saying he's going to put his law in your heart, and in your mind will I write them. And their sins and iniquities will I remember no more. Now, where remission of these, there is no more offering for sin. Now, again, when are sacrifices done? So when is shedding of blood done? We have Yehoshua, or they had the animals back then. That is a offering for sin. Yehoshua died because of sin. So, the only time we don't need an offering for sin is if we are not sinning. Where there's remission of them, there is no more offering for sin. That is the same as this. So this verse is what I was gonna say. Similar to this, think not that I come to destroy the law of prophets. I come to fulfill. Till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law till all be fulfilled. Same thing here. The law is not going to go away until we no longer need it. Okay. Same thing. Sacrifices are not going to go away until we no longer need it. Now, I'm not saying Yehoshua is going away, but we currently need Yehoshua because we're not perfect yet. We're not in New Jerusalem yet with the law so in us that we're actually performing it perfectly. We're not there yet. So until we get there, we need this information to tell us what we are to and not to do until we know everything. And then, just like it said here, where remission of these is, there is no more offering for sin. So, and then you had just to show you the verse she was talking about, not everyone that saith unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of the Father which is in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in thy name, and in thy name have cast out devils, and in thy name done many wonderful works? And then I will profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, ye that work iniquity.
Go
And-
back to, because there was a couple
Yep.
verses that we can read in the other one.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna get that.
And it's not so much like I said that you're going to hell, but like it
Condition
said
without
that
law. Being ignorant or violating it.
the idea of a kingdom, right? And the wedding thing, and where it says those will be least in heaven, or least in the kingdom, and those
Yep.
those who say to break the least of the commandments will be least in the kingdom. Whatever.
Yep.
Um,
It doesn't say you're not going to be part of the kingdom of the heaven, but it specifies who's going to be the least and who's going to be the greatest, and that is those who teach to keep the law.
right. And when you think about who is not gonna come to a king's wedding, right, or a wedding that the king prepares for his son, as Matthew describes it.
Vashti, apparently.
The lower Vashti wouldn't go, so the unfaithful
Yep.
wife.
She didn't even cheat on him. She just wouldn't show up.
Yeah, she was just disobedient.
Yep.
In a biblical way of looking at it, that's being unfaithful. So there's that, and that's a direct thing. She was making her own feast.
Mm-hmm.
She was at her own party, at her own feast with her girls, and he wanted her to come to his, and she denied it. That's another parallel. So her, and then in a kingdom though, it would be like the peasants, or the lowest in the kingdom that would not be at the wedding, or people that just don't come because they're like Vashti. You either refuse because you're the unfaithful, the disobedient bride who just wants to make her own feast, wants to do her own feast, or you go to your husband's feast that was prepared. You know what I mean? So
Yep. I could see that as you could either go to Satan's feast, you could quote unquote make your own by saying, well, I'm going to keep these particular days because I like them, but I'm going to call them something else. That's still creating your own, or just straight up go to the feasts that were commanded of you in Leviticus.
But it doesn't, like I said, that doesn't mean you're not in the kingdom.
No.
But you're gonna do that once you realize you chose, it was your choice, and you made the conscious decision not to go to the feast. When you realize that was the wedding supper, that was something that you were waiting to have you zipped up in the sky, poof, be gone, whatever you believe. Once it hits you in the face that's not gonna happen, and that the wedding feast isn't gonna be Christmas/Easter dinner with Jesus in the sky watching the earth burn. You realize that's not what it is. Big old ham on the table, whatever. Once you realize that's not gonna happen, and you realize that the wedding feast is over, and you are on the outside of it, and we're in the new covenant now, because the wedding feast is that's when you're that meal, that covenant meal at that wedding feast is like the contract signing ceremony of the whole marriage agreement. That's the sealing the deal of it. So that's the end of it. And once these people see that, they're going to be so upset. That's the weeping and gnashing of teeth. And it's not about because they're in hell, which is what Christianity teaches. So that's why Christians get so offended when you try to talk to them about this, because you're telling them they're going to hell.
Yeah, we're going to have to do a whole study on hell.
To us, we don't mean it like that.
No.
We're trying to get them to see what they're gonna miss out on, and
Yep.
they don't see it that way. They see it as we're sending them to hell, and we just see it as we're trying to get you to come to the wedding supper, and they're like, well, if we're not at the wedding supper, we're going to be in hell, because that's what they've been taught. So they don't, that part of it, so clarify that.
Yeah, hell. Well, just remember, read Revelation 22. There are sinners on the outside of New Jerusalem at the very end of the book. That should say something to you. We'll eventually get into the topic of quote-unquote hell and the original meaning of it and a whole lot more into it. But yeah, that's the number one thing. Revelation 22. Look at the very end of the book. It does not tell you that the earth is gone. It means New Jerusalem comes down, and if you are not following and you don't enter in through one of the 12 doors, the gates, then you're on the outside where the thieves and whoremongers and everything are. They're still there, though. They're still there on the outside of New Jerusalem in the end. Okay, so hopefully before we get into hell, that'll at least put some perspective in mind for you. But I think just in Hebrews 12, the only reason I had this one up is just because I like the way it was worded. And to Jesus, the mediator of the new covenant. So the mediator. Who was the mediator of the new covenant back in the Old Testament? The Yehoshua? Not this one. The other Yehoshua. Joshua. Granted, this should also be Joshua. But, they wanted to change his name to something that means something gross. But anyway, there was a mediator back then. Yehoshua was the mediator of the new covenant when they made it to the new Jerusalem back then, the promised land back then. And then that entire generation until Joshua died and until the elders died. So until Yehoshua and the elders died, everybody there perfectly followed law. So again, that was a new covenant. And that was a new covenant period where everybody knew who God was and everybody followed. So that is what it would look like again when we make it to the promised land. That was a shadow of our promised land in our New Jerusalem. But I liked that. And then into the blood of sprinkling, that speaketh better things than that of Abel. So just again, the blood of sprinkling. So there is no covenant without the sprinkling of blood. So that is, like I was saying before, Moses's and then Yehoshua's blood sprinkling. And that wraps up the topic of the new covenant, and hopefully kind of gives you guys a little more clarity as to what it actually is and how to tell whether or not you're under it. So hopefully by now we know that no, we are not under a new covenant time period, so that is something we are looking forward to. But that is it for that topic, so peace.